I wanted to bring on Chris Farrell, who's the Judicial Watch Director of Investigations and Research. Chris, good to have you back on the program.
Great to be with you again. Thanks.
So, Chris, put this in context. It's been years that a lot of Americans have said out loud, will you please investigate people like James Comey and Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and his lover Lisa Page and maybe Bruce Orr and a whole host of characters who we think were conspiring behind the scenes and used agencies of government against the public in trying to tell us, we're not going to let you choose Donald Trump. We're going to force you instead to choose Hillary Clinton by selectively sabotaging one campaign to let the other candidate win. That's really the essence of what was attempted, isn't it?
That is an excellent summary, and there's even a few more sort of insidious tangents or corollaries to that when it comes to the abuse of foreign counterintelligence authorities to manufacture and overseas foreign counterintelligence event. And there I'm talking about Carter Page and Mr. Papadopoulos up against the likes of Mifsud and Steph Halper. They manufactured circumstances or conditions in the United Kingdom deliberately offshore, overseas, so that they could falsely, disingenuously claim, oh, look, we have a foreign counterintelligence event, a reportable situation, and then import that back into the United States to run what was really a penetration operation against actually all three, the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, and then the Trump presidency. And, all of that is criminal conduct. I could cite to you specifically out of the executive order and law where it's criminal. I won't bore your audience with that, but that's the level of detail that these folks went to orchestrate and to really set up and carry out a plan that amounts to a coup. It's a soft coup. We don't have tanks out in the streets, and we don't have military law and all that sort of stuff that you think of in movies or third world dictatorships. But we have a soft coup. We have lawfare, a legal, I'm using air quotes, a legal coup carried out by the establishment at the DOJ, FBI, and elsewhere. We got to roll in, Clapper and Brennan as well in all this.
The bad thing about this, and explaining it to people, Chris, and this is why I like having you on and Tom Fitton and others from Judicial Watch, is that it almost reminds me of watching Game of Thrones. You got 1,000 different characters. Each one has its own, set of self-interest moves and maneuvers. And so you mentioned Joseph Mifsud. We've talked to George Papadopoulos on this program, and he describes, and tell me if I've got any of this wrong, but he describes he's a man who's working on behalf of the Trump campaign. Somebody approaches Joseph Mifsud, and says, hey, I may have some information. They didn't have any reason to go after Papadopoulos or anyone else, but they thought, well, if we can't get them to voluntarily, if we can't find anything they've done wrong, we'll manufacture something they've done wrong. We'll create a situation and then use that as a police officer trying to look for a way to stop a car might say it's a predicate stop. I'm looking for the predicate, the excuse, and sometimes that's done legitimately if you just wait for it. If the FBI actually manufactured that predicate and say, now with that predicate, we can go to the courts, the FISA court, and say, we need a wiretap on Carter Page, which gives us a window into the Trump campaign, and then we're off to the races. Is that essentially what you're talking about?
That is, and that also exemplifies why in the transition period, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, the then National Security Advisor, was quickly decapitated from the transition team because Flynn's 30-some-odd years as an intelligence officer, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, he knew all these little stunts and tricks, right? This guy understands human intelligence and counterintelligence, and had he been able to get a footing and understand what was going on, he would have unwound this conspiracy very quickly. So they had to quickly decapitate him, get him out of the picture, smear him, because of the Trump transition people, the early leadership. He was sort of dangerously knowledgeable, right? He would have seen through this plot in about 2 seconds.
And if he made a referral over to the Department of Justice and said, I've found people in the previous administration who broke the law, then the DOJ, I was very disappointed by Senator Sessions when he became AG, but I think William Barr is going to go for it. The one thing I don't hear reporters talk a lot about, and maybe they're just afraid to raise the name, but I'm going to ask you this, Chris. How much of this could have happened without either the acquiescence of or the direct sign-off of Barack Obama as president? In other words, could the DOJ and the FBI have been out running this little operation saying, we know the boss would like us to do this, but we're going to make sure that he has plausible deniability? Or do you think that some of the decision-making to go ahead with this, James Clapper said, we did all this stuff because Obama told us to? Is some of this going to go all the way up the chain to former President Obama?
I can up in the 90th percentile provide you a guarantee that Obama did know, and we have contemporaneous documentary proof uncovered by Judicial Watch that exposes it. And I will refer you to the text messages of Lisa Page, FBI General Counsel, or FBI Counsel to the director, and her boyfriend Peter Strzok. They're exchanging text messages. She's explained to him that she's very excited because she's preparing the briefing points for Director Comey to go run over and brief President Obama. And so she's got the PowerPoint going or whatever it is that she's preparing these notes. And she brags in a text message on the 6th of September, 2016, to her boyfriend and says, quote, POTUS, meaning President of the United States, Mr. Obama, POTUS wants to know everything we're doing, close quote. So I will take her at her word. That was an unguarded, spontaneous, excited, text to her boyfriend who was part of the conspiracy, and she's preparing Mr. Comey to go brief President Obama. And then we also know that, look, it's also on the record, that there was a meeting in the White House with the President, Comey, Brennan, Susan Rice, where they discussed that they're going to go down and brief the President-elect down in Trump Tower. And Obama jokes and says, good luck, I'm glad you're doing it. I mean, the level of knowledgeability in the White House, I believe, can be walked right into the Oval Office and put on Mr. Obama's lap.
Chris, I know that Judicial Watch, I mean, you've been in operation for decades. You look at both, Republican and Democrat administrations, and you break loose the information so the public knows what's going on. But does some of this, the fact that this is a clear and present danger to a huge number of people who are still politically powerful, who either served in the government or used to serve in the government, and it's such a threat, does some of this explain why Nancy Pelosi and some of the other players are so anxious to quickly impeach President Trump? Because if he stays in, and I have no doubt he will, I don't think impeachment's going to happen, all of this stuff is going to start spilling out. And when it does, if it goes all the way to Obama and a lot of the people under him, this is going to be a colossal disaster for the left side of American politics, isn't it?
Not just the left. I mean, the sort of loose, weak rhino right will take some shots in the jaw, too. I mean, look, President Trump is the disruptor, capital T, capital D, right? He has shaken the establishment of Washington, D.C., all the clubby little buddies, whether they have D's or R's after their name, and completely flipped over the table and broken the china. And they are frantically nervous. Because frankly, while he's carrying out his goals and objectives, he doesn't give a damn if somebody's hair gets mussed along the way. And so that terrifies the establishment, Democrats and Republicans alike. And, you see Pierre Delecto and a few other characters, who are very threatened by this because all the cozy little rules of the game, have been trashed, and they're terrified.
Well, Chris, I'm glad that they're terrified. I've had too many Republicans, as you said, rhinos, I call them that too, who've come on the show and I said, why aren't we going back after some of these people who've committed wrongdoing? And they say, oh, no, that's in the past. We need to move forward. And they say, you hear that from the left, but I also hear it from some rhino Republicans because, as you say, they have a club. And as long as you're in the club, then nothing bad ever really happens to you. I think bad things are about to happen to a lot of people. And Chris, I so much appreciate your work and Tom Fitton's work at Judicial Watch. Thanks for the time.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
That's Chris Farrell from Judicial Watch.